You've been taught to look at her strength, her charm, her presence. But what if her greatest leverage isn't what she shows, it's what she hides? Behind every seductive glance, there's a blind spot, an invisible weakness cloaked in elegance. And in this video, we're not here to admire the surface. We're here to decode the soft underbelly of emotional warfare. No one warns you about the things women won't admit, even to themselves. You're told to just be nice, to be patient, but no one tells you where her true vulnerability lies. And it's not about love or lust, it's about leverage. This is the layer where influence begins. This is the space where power is claimed or lost. Women aren't your enemy, but they're also not powerless. Many know, intuitively, how to use their subtle frailties as strategic tools. While men chase logic, women bend emotion to their will. And in that dance, men without awareness fall. What you don't see is often what controls you. Machiavelli said, "He who does not understand power becomes its servant." That's exactly what happens when you walk blind into a world of feminine psychology. This video isn't about judgment, it's about survival. If you want respect, you need strategy, and strategy starts with knowledge. You'll soon see how fragile doesn't mean weak, it means calculated. Many of these frailties aren't flaws, they're weapons. Hidden behind softness is the ability to control rooms, shape conversations, and dictate outcomes. And the more unaware you are of these mechanisms, the more they use you. This video will not teach you how to dominate women. It will teach you how not to be dominated. There's a difference, and the ones who don't learn it pay dearly in silence. Emotional manipulation doesn't always shout, it whispers through compliments, glances, silence, and timing. So take this as a blueprint. Each weakness revealed isn't something to exploit, it's something to understand. Because once you see how influence hides in fragility, you stop chasing validation and start commanding attention. The kind of attention that comes from authority, not noise. And in the end, it's not about her, it's about your evolution, your emotional power, your self-mastery. Let the average man scroll away. You're here for something deeper. And the first weakness will make that truth impossible to ignore.
She appears open, expressive, vulnerable, and that seems honest. But what you're really seeing is a tactical overexposure. Some women reveal emotions not to connect, but to control the emotional tempo of a room. It feels raw, but it's calculated. When someone leads with emotion, they often steer attention away from accountability. This isn't just drama, it's design. By putting their emotional needs at the center of the conversation, they shift the frame. Now it's about soothing her instead of examining the situation. It's a deflection that looks like fragility, but what's fragile can also become sharp when used as cover. This tactic thrives in relationships. She cries during confrontation. She gets overwhelmed when faced with logic. She says, "You don't understand how I feel," turning you from a partner into a villain. It's not always on purpose, but that doesn't make it any less effective. The strategy works best on men with protective instincts. If you're the type who wants to solve, fix, or comfort, she becomes the puzzle. And when you step into that role, you abandon your frame. Power doesn't exist in over-explaining yourself. It exists in not being emotionally hijacked. What can you do? Recognize the pattern early. If every disagreement ends with you apologizing while she cries, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. Learn to pause, observe, Respond instead of react. Self-mastery begins with emotional neutrality, not emotional rescue. You don't need to match her emotional tone, you need to control yours. That's where true masculine energy sits, not in coldness, but in calm. Let her see you aren't shaken. Let her feel that your leadership isn't conditional on her approval. Influence begins where validation ends. This isn't about silencing her feelings. It's about refusing to be ruled by them. Some men think emotional connection means giving in. No, it means listening with empathy, but leading with clarity. If you lose your logic, you lose your leverage. Stay rooted. And here's the twist. Some of the most emotionally intense women are actually the most emotionally defended. Their flood of feelings hides the very thing they fear most, being seen too clearly. And that's exactly what the next weakness reveals.
The illusion of indecision. She says she doesn't know what she wants. She hesitates. She's confused. But make no mistake, indecision is often a mask for control. When someone refuses to choose, they push the burden of action onto you. And in that hesitation, they gain subtle authority over your certainty. Indecision creates power through paralysis. The more you wait for her to be clear, the more control she has over your time, your emotions, your direction. She doesn't have to commit because you're doing it for her. You carry the weight while she keeps her options open. In relationships, this appears as, let's just see where this goes. In arguments, it becomes, I'm not ready to talk about it. In decisions, it's, you choose. And what looks like submission is often veiled dominance, because now every consequence is on you. Machiavelli would say, never let your enemy choose the battlefield. The same applies here. When she delays decisions, she dictates the timing. She doesn't need to lead overtly. She just needs you to hesitate long enough to lose momentum. That's how subtle power is exerted. Your move: set the frame early. Indecision doesn't require judgment, but it does require boundaries. If you wait too long for someone to choose you, you've already been chosen as a backup. Don't reward confusion with commitment. Respect flows toward clarity, not hesitation. Clarity isn't cruelty, it's leadership. If you're always adapting to her lack of decision, you're not being kind, you're being manipulated. Calmly state what you expect. Don't chase alignment, invite it. If she stays in the fog, walk forward anyway. Power respects motion. And here's the paradox. Many who act unsure are simply testing your certainty. They want to see if you'll bend, hesitate, or crumble. But when you remain grounded, their fog clears, because what they truly seek, sometimes unconsciously, is a man who isn't swayed by ambiguity. But what happens when indecision turns into silent punishment? That brings us to a darker form of control, one that doesn't just delay action, but freezes your sense of self. Let's talk about that next. The weapon of selective silence. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't argue. She just withdraws. And in that silence, power shifts. Selective silence is not passivity, it's precision. It punishes without confrontation and creates unease without words. That's the brilliance of its design. When a woman chooses silence, she forces you to fill in the blanks. You begin questioning yourself, overanalyzing your tone,
wondering where you went wrong. It's psychological chess. She makes no move, but suddenly you're chasing her validation, desperate to fix what was never clearly broken. This tactic appears most often after conflict or subtle disagreement. She's fine, but her distance says otherwise. And in relationships, silence feels like exile. You're emotionally suspended, waiting for re-entry, and the only way back is compliance. Silence becomes currency. A powerful man sees the game for what it is, a play for dominance through absence. The silence isn't empty, it's loaded. It says, I'm not available until you act how I want. And when you give in, not only does she regain control, she also confirms that silence controls you. So what do? You resist the urge to chase. You hold your frame. You match silence with calm presence. Not coldness, not retaliation, but unshakable stillness. The moment you start explaining, begging, or apologizing without clarity, you surrender your authority. Real leadership is not reactive. If you allow silent treatment to dictate your emotional state, you've given away your influence. Instead, respond with questions, not assumptions. Stay emotionally anchored. If she has something to say, let her say it. Don't dig through silence like it's scripture. There's a time to listen, yes, but there's also a time to detach. Not from her, but from the need to be understood by someone who refuses to speak. Influence is lost when you try to solve silence. It's regained when you no longer fear it. But what if silence isn't meant to control you, but to hide something even deeper? Let's explore what some women conceal behind sudden vulnerability and how that plays into the next unseen weakness.
Vulnerability as a power mechanism. She opens up, she cries, she tells you stories of pain and betrayal. And while it may seem like she's inviting you into her soul, what if that vulnerability isn't just real, it's rehearsed? In certain cases, emotional openness is a carefully placed bait, and many men walk right into the trap. Vulnerability disarms you. It softens your judgment. It makes you protect rather than question. And once she's positioned herself as someone who's been broken, you become the fixer. But here's the game. While you're busy proving you're not like the others, she's already redefined the dynamic. Machiavelli warned that those who appear weak can often wield the most dangerous forms of power precisely because they go unnoticed. Vulnerability, when authentic, fosters connection, but when it's used strategically, it becomes manipulation cloaked in softness. You start excusing bad behavior. She's just been through a lot. You begin compromising your standards, your values, even your time, because she needs healing. But in reality, you're not healing her. You're being shaped into her emotional caretaker, a role that limits your authority. So how do you spot it? Patterns. If every man before you was toxic, if every moment of intimacy is laced with pain and betrayal, and if your role feels more like a therapist than a partner, you're not in love. You're in a cycle of emotional dependency disguised as connection. Responding to vulnerability requires wisdom. You can care without being consumed. Ask yourself, is her openness followed by growth or stagnation? Does she use vulnerability to connect or to control the pace of the relationship? The answers reveal more than the tears ever will. Men who lack emotional boundaries often fall hardest for this tactic. They confuse intensity with intimacy. But true connection isn't built on rescuing. It's built on respect. Respect for your time, your standards, your emotional clarity. And when vulnerability becomes a mirror reflecting only your sympathy,
It sets the stage for something far more dangerous: admiration disguised as submission. That's what we'll unpack next.
Submission as a strategic facade. She agrees, she nods, she lets you lead. And just when you start to feel fully in charge, the direction changes. Some women have mastered the art of strategic submission, appearing compliant while subtly steering the relationship's course. Its influence hidden in apparent obedience. This isn't weakness, it's chess. While you're focused on leading, she's gathering data, learning your habits, your emotional triggers, your insecurities. And when the time comes, her suggestions no longer feel like suggestions. They feel like your own ideas. That's not coincidence, it's design. Machiavelli taught that it's better to appear harmless while slowly gaining ground. Strategic submission follows the same rule. It creates comfort, reduces your defenses, and earns your trust. But over time, you realize you're no longer deciding, you're just approving what was pre-designed. You see this in relationships where men slowly abandon their boundaries. Let's move in. Let's change that job. Let's not see your friends so much. None of it feels forced. It feels mutual. But eventually, the man wakes up in a life he never actively chose. So how do you identify it? Watch for the slow erosion of your preferences. Does she support your path, or slowly reroute it? Does she follow your lead, or make you feel guilty when you do? Strategic submission isn't loud. It's patient, persuasive, and persistent. The antidote isn't dominance. It's awareness. Lead, but stay conscious. Don't just look at what she agrees to. Look at what she initiates. If she's always redirecting your vision, then her submission might just be the packaging. The real agenda is control. Respect doesn't require pretending to follow. It's built in mutual clarity. If she can't challenge you directly, she might manipulate you indirectly. And that quiet erosion is far more dangerous than open conflict. It leaves you with no battles, only slow surrender. And when surrender becomes habit, it opens the door to something deeper, not control of your choices, but control of your identity. Let's explore how emotional validation turns into a silent weapon in the next weakness.
Validation as a form of emotional control. At first, it feels like support. She praises you, encourages you, tells you she's proud. But over time, you notice something. Her validation becomes conditional. You start chasing approval instead of living by principle. And that's when praise turns from affection into influence. She's no longer just appreciating who you are. She's shaping who you become. You change your tone to avoid upsetting her. You delay decisions until you know she'll approve. You soften your convictions to protect her comfort. And soon, your leadership becomes performance. Machiavelli would call this a soft power coup. She doesn't need to confront your authority if she can reshape it from within. By controlling your emotional reward system, she becomes the gatekeeper of your self-worth. And that's how silent empires are built. You'll notice this most when you try to assert your independence. Suddenly, the compliments vanish. She becomes distant. You feel guilty. And guilt is the strongest form of control because it makes you police yourself. She no longer needs to say anything. You censor your own voice. So how do you break the cycle? You reclaim your internal compass. You must learn to act based on what's right, not on what's praised. Validation should be received, not required. If you need applause to lead, you're not leading, you're auditioning.
This doesn't mean you reject all affirmation. It means you stop living for it. If you only feel confident when someone claps for you, your power belongs to their hands. Learn to be proud quietly. Make decisions without rehearsing her reaction in your head. Women who weaponize validation aren't always aware of it. Sometimes it's a habit, but whether conscious or not, the effect is the same. You become emotionally dependent on their emotional response, and that makes your leadership fragile. But what happens when emotional dependence turns into identity distortion? When who you are gets replaced by who she wants you to be? That hidden transformation is what we uncover next.
Shaping his identity through subtle redirection. She doesn't tell him who to be. She simply reacts to who he is. And over time, he adjusts, not out of pressure, but in pursuit of peace. This is identity redirection. It doesn't shout, it whispers. She doesn't demand a new man. She rewards the version that benefits her most. You begin by making small changes, less time with certain friends, softer opinions, different clothes, a filtered tone, a revised ambition. And every time you adapt, she becomes warmer, more affectionate, until one day you don't recognize yourself, and she won't let you return. This tactic isn't always conscious, but it's always effective. It leverages emotional reward and social pressure to sculpt your behavior. You want to keep her happy, so you discard parts of yourself that trigger resistance. Bit by bit, authenticity is replaced by strategy. Machiavelli taught that influence works best when it feels like freedom. And that's exactly how identity control works. It doesn't take power, it convinces you to give it. Not because you're weak, but because you think it's love. But real love doesn't erase, it reveals. The signs? You no longer share certain goals. You second-guess your instincts. You feel tension when you express yourself fully. And the worst part? You believe this version of you is better because she's happier. But her happiness came at the cost of your integrity. The fix? Recenter. Spend time alone. Revisit what you used to love. Reclaim opinions you stopped expressing, not with hostility, but with clarity. If she values you, she'll adapt to your wholeness. If she resists, then her love was for the mold, not the man. This isn't about rebellion, it's about remembering. Influence without identity is submission. A man who forgets himself becomes easy to reshape, easy to lead, and easy to discard when his usefulness fades. But what if reshaping you isn't enough? What if the next move is isolating you so no one reminds you of who you were? That's where we go next.
The isolation blueprint. It starts small. I don't like how your friend talks to you. Your family doesn't really support us. That guy at work seems jealous. One by one, the connections around you become suspect. And slowly, the circle tightens until she's the only one left inside it. This is not about protection. It's about positioning. Isolation isn't always forced. It's often implied. She sows seeds of doubt, not to push others away, but to make you do it for her. And when the crowd disappears, so does your reference point. Now she defines what's true. Machiavelli warned, never let another gain full access to your counsel. When one voice replaces many, power centralizes. And when power centralizes, so does perception. She becomes the mirror, the critic, the cheerleader, the judge, all in one. That's not intimacy, it's domination. The danger isn't in her dislike of others, it's in your agreement. You start making excuses. They don't get us. She's been hurt before. But each agreement cuts a tie to your former self. Your friends stop calling, your family pulls back, and your world shrinks without a sound. A man without allies is easier to control. He's emotionally dependent, logistically bound, spiritually muted. And when conflict arises, there's no one to offer clarity, only her version of events. That's how kingdoms fall, not with swords, but with silence. So what's the counter move? Keep your circle tight and loyal. Test her tolerance for your independence. Bring her into your world, but never replace it with hers. A woman who respects you will support your alliances, not sabotage them. True leadership doesn't isolate, it fortifies. And no love should cost you your tribe. If everyone around you is suddenly the problem, maybe the problem is the isolation strategy itself. And that strategy often leads to the final move, the emotional withdrawal that breaks your spirit while smiling to your face. Let's break that illusion next.
Emotional withholding disguised as peace. She doesn't yell. She doesn't criticize. She simply stops giving. Her affection fades. Her laughter quiets. The warmth you once felt becomes a distant memory. And yet, she insists everything's fine. This is emotional withholding, the quietest form of psychological warfare. It's not punishment, it's training. Every time you step out of line, she withholds approval, closeness, connection. And when you comply, she returns it, piece by piece. It's not that she stopped loving, it's that love became leverage. Subtle, reversible, devastating. Machiavelli would call this the illusion of peace. You believe harmony has returned, but it's merely silence wrapped around submission. She no longer needs conflict to win. She has created a reward system that governs your emotions without ever raising her voice. The worst part? You begin adjusting, not to avoid pain, but to regain her softness. Her love became a drug, and like any addict, you start living for the next high. A compliment, a touch, a smile. You forget who you were before you needed her permission to feel whole. This creates a loop. You overperform, she under-delivers. You question your value, she assures you with crumbs. You apologize for imagined offenses, and she never has to say a word. Emotional withdrawal isn't neglect. It's control dressed as detachment. To break free, you must redefine peace. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of authenticity. You must confront the silence, ask the hard questions, and if she cannot engage without retreating, then her love was always a contract, not a connection. Power lies in the ability to hold your ground when affection is withheld, not in retaliation, but in resilience. A leader doesn't beg for closeness. He creates space where mutual respect either flourishes or fades. And when the silence finally becomes unbearable, many men collapse, but some awaken. And what they see next is something most never speak of. That's the truth we'll uncover in the final revelation.
When her silence is a weapon, not a wound. She stops replying, not with anger, but with absence. You replay your words, overanalyze the silence and wonder what you did wrong. This is not distance, it's design. Her silence isn't from pain, it's a power play, a strategy sharpened by emotional precision. Silence becomes the battlefield. No explosions, no screaming, just tension. And in that tension, you're forced to act, to chase, to apologize, to guess. And guesswork erodes confidence. That's how you turn a grounded man into a servant of uncertainty. Machiavelli taught that confusion favors the ruler, and silence is the perfect confusion. When you don't know what she's thinking, you begin negotiating with shadows. You make offers, change behavior, give in to emotional debt she never voiced because she didn't have to. This isn't the cold shoulder, it's engineered fog, a way to dominate without looking dominant. And the more you try to restore the connection, the more she tightens control, not through words, but through the hunting absence of them. Eventually, you link silence with your worth. You think, if she's quiet, I must have failed. But in truth, you were trapped in a game where only she knew the rules. And every time you play along, the rules change again. That's not intimacy. It's instability in disguise. So how do you reclaim your ground? Stop responding to silence with submission. Respond with strength. Hold your position. Communicate clearly, but don't beg for resolution. If she values you, she'll come forward. If not, her silence spoke louder than any explanation ever could. The man who cannot endure silence becomes a puppet. The man who embraces it becomes unshakable. Authority isn't found in volume. It's forged in how you hold yourself when others try to unbalance you. And when you master this final lesson, something changes. You no longer just attract respect, you command it. But the question remains, will you rise to that level or keep chasing the silence?
Power only serves the man who claims it. Now that you've seen how quiet tactics can reshape a man without him ever noticing, what will you do with this awareness? Will you pretend it doesn't matter? Or will you finally reclaim the authority that's always been yours? The most dangerous manipulation is the one that feels like comfort. And now that you know how it works, you can no longer play dumb. The next time she withdraws affection, rewrites your beliefs, or isolates you under the banner of love, you'll see it. Will you act? Think about the patterns in your own life. Have you silenced parts of yourself to keep the peace? Have you changed to be more accepted, but ended up feeling less like a man? You don't need to answer me, but you owe yourself that question. And now I ask you, which tactic hit you hardest? Which moment made you pause and realize that's been happening to me? Share it below, not just to vent, but to break the silence other men are still trapped in. Your comment might free someone else. If this video opened your eyes, even just a little, don't lose momentum. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for the next layer of the strategy. Because this isn't about fear, it's about clarity. And clarity is where true power begins. Your journey to self-mastery doesn't end here. In fact, it just started. Tap into the next lesson that's appearing right now on your screen and also linked in the description. One click could unlock the peace you've been missing. You already know what silence can do, but do you know what you could become if you mastered it? That's not a theory, that's the next revelation, and it's waiting for you right there.